Okay, now we're recording. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Hartman. This is my weekly question and answer for May 14th, 2020. Quick disclaimer before I jump into the questions. I am a nutritional therapy practitioner. I do not diagnose or treat any disease. The information that is presented here is for general information only and should not be used as a substitute for medical advice. Always consult with your medical provider before making any changes to your diet, your supplement, medication, or exercise programs. So I'm going to jump right in now to the questions. First question comes from Andrea. And it is a question that I get asked a lot, and it has to do with whether or not it's possible to do AIP without eating meat. She says she's not currently a vegetarian, but is thinking that she wants to cut out meat. And before I jump into my answer to this, I just want to kind of step back and say that I do have a lot of empathy for people who are grappling with this issue, especially if your concern for eating meat comes from any concern for maybe the welfare of animals or even of humans. I know one thing we've been hearing a lot about lately is kind of the conditions inside meat packing plants and how factories that get meat from being an animal to being food for us to eat maybe aren't both the best thing for the animals, but also probably not for the humans that have to work in them as well. So I want to make sure that you know that I do understand that concern. So if that's kind of where that's coming from, the first thing I always encourage people to do is to see if there are ways that you can investigate eating meat, keeping meat, this healthful food in your diet in a way that maybe addresses some of those concerns, like looking for a farmer locally, looking for somebody who is doing this the right way, who's raising meat in a way that is kind to the animals, kind to humans, hopefully kind to the planet. There's a lot of ways that you can do that. So I recommend, looking into that if it's coming from kind of that perspective. And the reason I start there is because meat does provide some really good, important nutrition for us, especially when we are maybe not in the best of health and trying to get healthy. So when people ask me if it's possible to be a healthy vegetarian, that's a different question. I do think it's possible for a healthy person to stay healthy by eating a vegetarian diet, but I do think it's very difficult for a person who is struggling with their health to get healthier or to get to a place of being healthy while eating a vegetarian diet, especially if you're trying to follow AIP. Now, there are certainly people who will argue with that case and who will claim that they are the exception to this. There's a couple Facebook groups I know that are pretty active that are vegetarian or vegan, even AIP groups. But I don't advise that with my clients personally or with any of you that I'm speaking to now. I don't advise cutting out something that provides such great nutrition for us to heal. Meat provides not only protein, but it also provides some nutrients that are very hard to get in your diet, especially when your diet is excluding the things it's excluding in AIP. So B vitamins, for example, B12 is one that vegans are notoriously, in need of supplementing with. And it's really almost impossible to get that in a non-meat, non-animal product diet. And when you go onto AIP and you are also cutting out legumes, and you're also cutting out eggs, and you're also having to avoid any dairy, it's really hard to get those nutrients and to have that complete profile. So is it possible? Is it realistic? I'm not going to say it's impossible. I'm not going to say it's a terrible idea. It's not something that I recommend for any of my clients, though. If I were to have a client who said they want to be vegetarian, they want to not eat meat, and they want to do AIP, they have an autoimmune disease or suspect an autoimmune disease, I'm generally going to tell them that I'm not the right practitioner for them. And AIP may not be the right approach for somebody who doesn't want to include animal products in their diet. So they may want to look into other protocols, working in another mode, looking at a different way of approaching this. So I think that is the short answer, to that question. If you want to just cut back on the amount of meat that you're eating, that is, first of all, I would question whether you think you need to, why you think you need to. Meat is not, if it's playing an appropriate role in your diet, there's may not be any need for you to cut back. But some people, find that, well, maybe there's like an expense factor to it. Meat has gotten a little bit more expensive these days. Maybe it's harder to get. There are ways that you can cut back some of it. If you really feel strongly about not eating a particular type of meat, or you have a religious objection perhaps to, eating one type of meat, can you instead eat maybe fish more? I do think it's possible to do AIP as a pescatarian and get healthy, to have that healing diet need there met. So that's a possibility. And also, looking at, if you're feeling like, sometimes when people don't want to eat meat because of the environmental impact, looking at ways that you might be able to mitigate that by not only sourcing your meat from farmers that are using like regenerative agriculture, but also trying to eat nose to tail, recognizing that there are parts of the animal that are oftentimes not utilized well. And if you are utilizing them, you're part of the solution more than you might be the problem, if you feel like there's a problem, that is. So that's, that is it in a nutshell. Again, I am very empathetic to this concern, but I do think that it is very hard, if not impossible. So again, I can't say for certain that it's not possible or that it's not realistic, but it's not what I recommend when I'm working with people. The next question has to do with intermittent fasting. This is something that we all hear a lot about lately. And, there's a lot of different definitions of what is meant by intermittent fasting. So I won't try to get into, what people mean, but they can mean anything from, eating just, one day out of every 2 days, not, it can be fasting, mimicking diet. It can be eating one meal a day. It can be, eating every other day. There's a lot of different ways that people will define what they mean by intermittent fasting. So I'm just going to kind of talk about what I do recommend, rather than whether I, feel like other people's ideas are good or bad. First of all, I think that being mindful of what time of the day that you're eating is actually a really wise idea for all of us. And that there is a case to be made for restricting that to some degree. What I usually recommend my clients start with is to pick a 12-hour window of their day that's going to be consistent for them, in which they do eat, and then the other 12, obviously, because we have 24 hours in a day, they will not be eating. So it might make most sense for somebody to have it be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That might be their 12 hours in which they do eat. And then at 7 p.m., you close that window, and you are now fasting until breakfast. So breakfast means, breaking fast. So you're fasting then overnight. So that is something, and it doesn't need to be 7 to 7. It could be 6 to 6. It could be 8 to 8, 9 to 9, whatever works for you. But I do recommend my clients pick out that 12-hour window and be consistent with that. That ties then to your circadian rhythm. There's a lot of evidence that that's a good, healthy way to live in this world, to have that circadian rhythm pattern entrenched. And then on top of that, you're going to work a few more things in. One is that it's best if you can have 4 to 5 hours of not eating before you go to bed. So when I just said, you could eat from 9 to 9, but if you're going to bed at 10, that isn't going to give you that 4 to 5 hours. Again, this can be tricky for some people to get every night, especially if you've got, family obligations, like maybe you're eating dinner late when everybody comes home, or you're feeding kids and then eating yourself. So this is a goal to aim for, but trying to have at least a couple hours, if not that 4 to 5 hours before you go to bed. So if you kind of are thinking about what's my 12-hour window going to be, have that 12-hour window end at a time when it's a few more hours before you go to bed. So that's going to mean no evening snacking, which is healthy. That's a healthy thing for us to not do. Don't eat evening snacking. And hard for a lot of people, because we have a lot of triggers associated with snacking in the evening. A lot of people will pull out the sweets and the snacks and stuff when they're watching TV, or the kids have gone to bed and they're relaxing. So that can be a big change for some people, but it's good. There's a lot of reasons for, why that's good to not eat during those hours. I won't get into them right now, but it's definitely something I try to get people to start thinking about. There are a few exceptions to that. And so if you're one of my clients and we talk about you being an exception to that temporarily or permanently, that is one thing. But for most of us, it's good to try to get that because it helps our digestion. It helps us just generally sleep better. It's good for getting ready in the morning, waking up and feeling ready to start your day with something to kickstart your metabolism. I do recommend people eat breakfast. This is something you can play around with later, but in the early stages of your healing journey, whatever that might mean for you, starting your day with breakfast is a good idea. And then it's good to try to space your meals apart so that you have, 3 to 5 hours in between each of your meals. This allows for digestion to happen, these cleansing waves, which help keep your gut flowing, properly, help avoid some of the issues that some people will have with bacteria building up and ending up in a diagnosable condition called SIBO. But just generally good practice. It also helps regulate your hunger hormones and the fat storage hormones. So if you can eat 3 times a day within a 12-hour window and have a few hours before you go to bed, that's what I really want people to be doing. And then from there, when you're really starting to feel good, it's fine to start to play with that, because what you'll find is that you have this 12-hour window and you're not eating before you go to bed. That might end up just naturally shrinking, and that's okay. It's fine for it to start shrinking. Not a problem at all. You have dinner a little earlier, breakfast a little bit later. Maybe eventually your 12-hour window becomes a 10-hour window. Maybe eventually it even becomes a 9 or an 8-hour window in which you eat, which now you kind of hit into that same thing that some people call intermittent fasting, where they're only eating in an 8-hour window. I recommend people that I work with who have, autoimmune conditions, or have a suspected autoimmune condition, or have had a lot of adrenal stress, that they not make that their goal. They just sort of allow that to naturally happen. So again, starting with 12 hours, maybe it comes back, squeezes down eventually to a smaller window. That could be good for that person individually. But, everybody's unique. So this kind of all comes back to the same thing I say every week about these. We have a lot of bio-individuality that we need to respect. And so what works for somebody else may not work for you. You have to listen to your body, and you have to listen to the body's changing signals, because what works for you right now is not necessarily going to work for you in the dead of winter. This circadian rhythm thing that we're talking about, when this daylight is really linked, the day length is different. It might feel really different, for you in terms of when you should eat. A lot of people will find that they actually do even better with a narrower window when it's dark a longer period of time. So be flexible with that, be willing to change, be open to your body's cues, and recognize that whether something's a good idea for you, it may be right now, it may not be. We have to be open to experiments. We have to be open to listening to our own intuition sometimes, and making those adjustments as you go. So I hope that helps answer that question. Again, I hope you got to that I didn't say I think it's a bad idea, but I also didn't say it's a good idea. So that's kind of, yeah, I'm standing in both of those sides of that arena. There's another, which do I think is better question. I forgot this one was in here. So this comes from, I think it's Mikalea. I think that's how it's pronounced. Which approach do you think is better? Transitioning to AIP slowly, or just jumping in with 2 feet right away? So again, yeah, you're probably already guessing I'm going to say it depends on who you are. Actually, I think for most people, unless proven otherwise, most people really should transition to AIP slowly. It's a big change. If you're eating a standard diet right now, if you're eating the diet that the typical average, English speaking person, Western diet, American diet, whatever that is, if that's what you're currently eating, AIP is a huge difference. So I think taking that transition slowly is wise. But there are multiple ways you can make that transition. One way is that you could start by eliminating one group of foods and see how that goes, and then another, and then another, and then another. So for example, you could start by maybe just going grain-free, which would be a lot like a paleo diet, but maybe even less of a strict paleo diet. grain-free, eliminating all grains from your diet is a huge change from the standard diet. That's a big, big change, big adjustment, but it might be somewhat accessible for people because there's a lot of awareness these days of what grain is, grain-free, a lot of recipes and resources in the paleo world that you can use to support yourself in that kind of, first step to make that big change, but not having to worry about all the other pieces of what AIP requires. And then doing that for a week or 2 or 3, and maybe after 2 weeks you find, I feel so good, I don't even feel like I need to rush into doing any of the other changes. And if that was the case, more power to you. There's nothing that says that you have to, just because you have an autoimmune disease, do the full AIP elimination. You could do it in stages and see how you go. So I think that there's another reason to do it. What usually happens though, and this was my experience and is a lot of people's experience, is that they feel pretty good and they get excited and they think, I wonder how much better I can feel. So then you get motivated to make those other changes. So you could do that. You could start with grains, do that for a week or 2. Then you could maybe cut out the legumes. So you're more into a real primal diet. Then you could maybe cut out dairy. Then maybe you say, okay, let me see what happens when I take out nightshades and nuts and then eggs and so on. When I look back at kind of my journey into AIP way back in 2013, that's essentially how I did it, not on purpose, but because AIP as a concept was still pretty new. And so I had started out changing my diet to follow one particular protocol that was very similar to paleo, felt pretty good with it. That's actually when I started blogging, started getting excited about nutrition. And then that led me to learn more and to see what other people were doing, and eventually realizing people were talking about some other things I'd never even heard of. I didn't know what a nightshade was. I didn't know why anybody would cut out eggs. I didn't know, nuts could be problematic, and so then I started to cut those other groups out and ultimately kind of got to what was called AIP, said, all right, here I am. I've eliminated everything that's in this AIP umbrella. I'm going to do this now, like just keep eating like this for at least 30 days. And then I'll start to reintroduce foods. And so that's exactly, of course, what we recommend you do. At the time, that was still kind of being just formed. So that is, the approach that I have seen works the most, effectively for a lot of people to kind of ease into it, because some of those people find out that they get like 3/4 of the way through that whole eliminating the food process and are like, I feel so great, I don't even have to worry about these other food groups for now. Or they're feeling so great, they eliminate those other ones, they don't notice a huge difference, they do that like 30 days just to see how things are, and then as they're ready to reintroduce foods, they come right back really easy, probably because they were healing all along during that transition time. People who just jump right in sometimes have success. Sometimes they jump right in and they jump right back out. They fall out, because they don't have any sort of training wheels built up, a foundation built up to fall back on. So that's one of the challenges that I see when people just jump right in, is that they jump in and they do it sort of with the same mentality that somebody doing like a Whole30 has. Like, I just have to do this for 30 days. And that's hard to have that mentality, because it's like you're counting days till you can stop doing it. And you probably just get to the point where it's starting to maybe take effect, where if you go easing in, you're giving credit to the idea that, baby steps might be building success for you in multiple ways. And it may be very illustrative to kind of what you need if you do it that way. There are other ways that you can transition slowly, though. It doesn't have to be by food group. That's sort of the classic, kind of what we think about. I've worked with some clients who their bigger hurdle for them was that they were not comfortable cooking at all. They were not people who fed themselves by eating food that they prepared themselves. They pretty much relied on prepared foods, takeout, fast food, or, maybe even high quality food, but food that was like made in a restaurant or was just assembling things. And so for them, what we had identified really early on, their big challenge was going to be that all of those resources that they had used in the past to make sure they got to eat, were not going to be able to feed them for AIP. They weren't going to be able to get that takeout or that carry out or that, packaged food. And so for them, our transition approach was actually to have them just start learning to cook. So it became less about like, I want you to cut out foods, and it came more of like, I want you to make this recipe this weekend so that you learn some skills. I want you to, watch these videos, learn how to cook, learn how some basic skills, get really comfortable with that. And then we'll start talking about kind of cutting out foods. Other people, maybe they already were comfortable in the kitchen, they could cook, but what they were eating, because they're kind of picky eaters maybe, was not very diverse and very nutrient dense. So what I would then have them do, in this case, these clients, their transition focus might be to start by adding in nutrient dense foods, focusing on, one type of food that they're going to add in each week until they get to this point where they've got a really great nutrient dense diet that is sort of crowding out some of the elements that we're going to eliminate anyway on AIP, and they're sort of down to just a few extra things that they have to cut out. No matter which approach you take, I think it's important to recognize that AIP is, that transition, you're already transitioning it to it, by the way, if you're just asking this question. You're already in that process, because you're starting to plan for it. You're starting to question, how should I do that? Do I want to get help? Do I want to work with a coach? Do I need some more resources? When do I start? And what is that going to look like? So recognizing that this is all part of a process that is honestly something you're committing to forever. And I say that with some hesitation in a way, because I don't want you to think what I mean is that you're going to start eating AIP, meaning the elimination phase, and that's the way you will eat for the rest of your life, and you will just stay on AIP forever, because absolutely that is not. If anybody watches these sessions and follows me knows, I know 2 weeks ago we had a whole thing on why would you reintroduce foods, and I talked about why that was. But it's your whole life that you're going to do, because you're committing to using food to be healthy, and you're never going to get to stop eating. That you're never going to get to that point where, like, I no longer have to think about what I eat, because food is going to continue to feed you in ways that are not just feeding your appetites and filling you up and getting you through the day with energy, with calories that get you able to move, but also providing nutrients for you, providing that foundation that helps you heal and to stay in a healthy state. So if your transition to AIP feels slow, that's okay, because you're just taking the steps as you need them to go in order to make this a commitment of something you can sustain for the rest of your life. So jumping right into that may work for some people, but I'm really have become over the last few years more and more of the mindset that the vast majority of us should be the tortoise and not the hare. We should be the tortoise. We should be the ones taking our time, experimenting along the way, allowing there to be some stumbles, to recognize that there's going to be times when, you're going to find that things don't quite work the way you had planned, and you have to adapt to them. What happens when people jump in with the mentality of kind of like an all or nothing approach is that when those stumbles come along, they don't have any resources for how to go with the flow and adapt to them. So that's another reason that transitioning slowly can be really helpful. Okay, do we have enough time? Yeah, the last question is something that actually is unrelated to food. It came up on my Instagram the other day. I posted something about, I went to get some blood drawn because I have to stay on top of my health as well. And while I was there, of course, everybody was wearing masks. And then I posted a funny meme on Instagram about mask wearing set to the tune of a Freddie Mercury song, a Queen song. So anyway, there was some response to that. A couple of people responded to my Instagram thread, feeling like mask wearing was just I don't know, they were opposed to it. So I'm not anybody I'm not an infectious disease expert. I'm not a doctor. I only can say what I feel about, doing our part to protect each other in this scary time of dealing with this virus. So first of all, do I think we should be wearing masks all the time? No. No, you don't need to wear a mask if you're by yourself or you're in an outdoor space with lots of air around you and people aren't anywhere near you. But if you do have to go out into the world for essential activities, I mean, the recommendation from most of the experts is that we should wear masks. And the reason we're wearing a mask, this is important to remember, is that the mask protects other people in case you have a germ that they would be susceptible to. You know, not everybody, you know, kind of knows this about me, but I grew up in a house with a sibling who had a serious illness, and so we learned this from an early age, that you know, you have to think about how somebody else may be harmed by something that you could withstand. So you could, at this point, have, and I'm not even necessarily talking about, you know, this particular concern, but that's why we would be wearing the masks. You could have this virus and not know it yet, and still be able to spread it to people. And the mask has been proven to at least slow that down. So if you're wearing the mask and you suddenly sneeze, right? Because that can happen, a surprise sneeze while you're in the grocery store, or you have to cough, or you're breathing heavily, whatever it is that might transmit it, the mask will slow that down. So should we be doing that? Yes, of course we should. If we're going out into a place where there will be other people who can't leave that space. You know, when we go to the grocery store, I'm coming in, I'm going to be there for a few minutes and I leave, but the grocery store workers are there all day being exposed to that. So I just wanted to add that question in there because I've been asked that, and I was surprised that there were people who thought that, you know, my kind of humorous take on it meant something more than it did. I think we wear masks as part of the social contract right now to say, I'm looking out for you because I think I'm okay. I feel good, but you never know. So I'm going to wear a mask, and I'm going to hope that you do too. And if I'm in a space and all the people around me are all wearing masks, we're all like, okay, we're all doing our part. And that's what I'm going to do. And I hope you all do too. I hope everybody listening to this is staying healthy, doing your part to keep everybody else healthy, and coming in to take care of yourself, you know, because life goes on. You know, we continue to have the same concerns about, you know, keeping ourselves well fed and managing our health and managing our stress. And we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to take care of each other. So we take care of ourselves by feeding ourselves well. We take care of each other by practicing social distancing, by wearing a mask when we have to, and staying home when we can, you know. So that's it. That's it for today. Come back next week. I'll have more questions to answer. Please submit your questions at least 2 hours before, so I have enough time to get them on this little PowerPoint and to look up any answers if I feel like I need to do any research. And I think that's it. So I'm going to stop the sharing and the meeting and the recording. Bye-bye.